you see what's happening with AI and how is that impacting us. One of the fears that I have is that judges hear about these things that are going on where AI is hallucinating a case. And the question is how do the AI mistakes compare to human mistakes at a macro level? Macro level, it's showing us very much how powerful it can be.
Welcome to Trial Lawyer View, the podcast dedicated to the fierce yet compassionate lawyers who fight every day for justice in the courtroom. Our guests are top trial lawyers and their firms who share their stories and experiences, offering valuable insights into their journey, as well as expert guests who provide actionable strategies and practical tips for personal injury lawyers looking to optimize their operations, enhance client service, and drive growth in their practices. Trial Lawyer View is brought to you by Synergy. At Synergy, we aren't just a service provider. We are a strategic partner for personal injury law firms, seamlessly integrating with law firms to boost efficiency from day one. Outsourcing cumbersome administrative tasks like lien resolution and Medicare compliance to an expert partner like Synergy enables personal injury firms to focus on what they do best.
Welcome to another episode of Trial Lawyer Review, where I'm joined by Sean Domnick of Rafferty, Domnick, Cunningham, and Yaffa. Sean is a friend and was one of the first guests on Trial Lawyer Review and is the first repeat guest on the podcast. He is an accomplished trial lawyer and a dynamic leader in the legal community. As the former president of the American Association for Justice, Sean has been at the forefront of advocating for the rights of injured individuals and reforming the personal injury landscape. His leadership with the AAJ allowed him to shape national policy, push for justice reforms, and champion consumer rights on a large scale. Over the years, Sean's commitment to justice and excellence in the legal profession has earned him recognition as a powerful voice within the advocacy community. Sean takes his expertise and passion for justice within his own firm to the next level, bringing his vision for client-centered, results-driven legal representation to life into the practice. Drawing from his years of experience, including his leadership at the AAJ, Sean has built a firm committed to helping individuals who need it most, those whose lives have been disrupted by injury. In this episode of Trial Lawyer Review, Sean discusses his experiences as president of AAJ and the influence it has had on his thinking about the profession, along with his new diversification of his law firm's already dynamic practice. Sean, welcome to Trial Lawyer Review, and thank you for being with me today on the podcast for a second time. You are my first repeat guest.
Oh, I'm very lucky and very honored.
I'm lucky. I'm glad that we get this opportunity to connect again.
Likewise.
So you've served as president of AAJ, and I wanted to ask you about being the leader of that organization. You had this incredible opportunity to travel around the country and speak with trial lawyers in almost every state. I'm curious about the most valuable lessons you learned during your time leading this significant organization, the AAJ.
Well, it was truly an incredible experience and an opportunity for me, for which I am eternally grateful. One of the things that I wasn't sure of going into the year was how people were going to be. Was it going to be everywhere I go that people were saying, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And it turned out to be quite the opposite. Instead, people were just so grateful, understanding the sacrifice that officers have to make, time away from your family, time away from your practice, and all of those types of things. But what it really reinforced is the fact that relationships are really what drive things for all of us. And it's how do I create connections? How do I make sure that people know that they are heard, so that even if we end up doing something that may be different than what it is that they think is the right path forward, that they know that they had an opportunity to be heard, an opportunity to participate in a meaningful way, and so that whatever the final decision that was made, that they know that people made it in a considered manner. And so that's really it. Like you have to be able to build consensus, but once a decision is made, you have to be able to corral everybody to go in the direction that we've all decided, even if their initial thought process or vote was that's not really the way I think we ought to go.
Well, I mean, isn't that incredibly important and critical to being a leader in your business as well? I mean, as you know,
Yeah.
you
Every aspect of what we do, if I'm standing in front of a jury, I'm trying to get a jury to do the same thing, come together and go in the place where I want them to go, even if perhaps they might have some initial hesitancy about going there. And certainly within a law firm, you know how trial lawyers are. We're not shy about what it is that we want to do. We're not shy about our opinions. And so being able to make sure that you have a unit that's working together towards a common goal is so important. And we talk about it a lot here at our firm, where really, there are two things that you're trying to accomplish as a trial lawyer. The first is, how do I get justice for that particular client that I have who's come to me for them, for their family? But also, how do I make the world a safer and better place? How do I transform what it is that I'm trying to do in this one particular case so that I'm not representing another family in the future over the same type of thing? So we really think about that. And one of the things we talk about internally is a concept of cases or causes, not just cases. And so, how do we turn this singular thing into something for the greater good?
So, as the leader of AAJ, what were some of the key issues you focused on that you believe are critical to the future of personal injury practice, particularly in the areas of consumer rights and access to justice?
Well, there's so much that's going on right now, and you see what's happening with AI, and how is that impacting us? I ended up creating a special committee to look at AI. One of the fears that I have is that judges who may not be as connected with modern technology as some of the rest of us, and they hear about these things that are going on where AI is hallucinating a case. And even though that is incredibly rare that lawyers are submitting that type of thing, it gets all the publicity. And AI is here to stay, and it can be very powerful and very helpful. So, working on how is it that AI can help our practices, be a part of our practices while recognizing the dangers that are out there of utilizing it. That was a big thing to get off the ground, and we're still working on getting that. Right now, one of the issues that's out there is the rule of law, and do just judicial orders have meaning, and how are they going to be enforced? And that's something that we're seeing across the board, and it has leaked its way into the types of cases that plaintiffs lawyers handle. And so making sure that if a judge makes a ruling, that the mechanism for the enforcement is there, and that the rule of law is respected. So those are a couple of the issues that we've been dealing with. Then, there was another issue that I certainly wasn't something I was expecting at the beginning of the year, but was really difficult. Was once October 7th happened in Israel, and that created some strong opinions for a lot of people, understandably so. And so then, as a political organization on the political side, where we were focused on the Seventh Amendment and protecting the civil justice system, and yet we have members who are looking at bigger pictures that are out there and making sure that while they're fighting those meaningful battles for themselves, that they understand where we are and what we're doing and why we had to do it. So that was something that I had a lot of conversations with a lot of lawyers about.
Well, I don't want to sidetrack us too much, but this idea of the attack on rule of law or what's going on is something I haven't really talked with anybody about on the podcast, but incredibly relevant to what's been going on. And it's interesting to watch executive orders being drafted to target law firms to suppress their activities and make them work on behalf of causes that are, near and dear to one particular party. It's just very much twisted the law in ways that a lawyer, it scares the heck out of me.
It is extraordinary what we're seeing right now. And to see some of the firms that we have seen do what they're doing has been disappointing. But to see the others that have stood up to fight, and my firm has signed on to the amicus briefs in support of those firms in their right to be able to represent people, and everybody is entitled to have an attorney, and so that they ought not to be penalized because they might be representing somebody who is uh, not in favor at the particular moment. And you know, I don't view these things through the lens of one party versus the other. What I've learned over time is once you breach a norm, the pendulum swings, and then the other people are going to be in charge, and they're going to breach the norm. And so it ends up being harmful to everybody. And if we as lawyers and as trial lawyers are not willing to stand up for the rule of law and support the judiciary, then how can we expect them to stand up and support us? And so, because they're under, it's a lot of attack that they're under. And so, there are times when you have to stand up and be counted. And now is one of those moments where I think we really have to do that. And whether or not that might put us on somebody's bullseye, and we're trial lawyers. We take on power, and we let people know what it is that's right and what's wrong. So it's tough times right now. But I think what you're starting to see is a unification of people of a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different political beliefs, but they are rallying behind the concept that without the rule of law, what are we?
Yeah, defending a pillar of our democracy, the judiciary and its independence and the right for people to have representation and all of that is just critically important. Glad to hear that you guys are taking that kind of active lead.
Yeah.
Not surprising to me at all. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about AI since you brought up that being something that AAJ has created a task force or a committee on, because the speed at which that is moving, and I've been watching more so in this space, is breathtaking what's coming about and how it's being deployed. But there's a lot of risk with that, particularly if it's relied upon in a way that, because it's only an LLM is only as good as what's been put into it. And, I know had Robert Simon on the podcast previously, and he was talking about, the security, and he's been talking about this in terms of ethical responsibilities of client data that's being put in there, but then also the dangers of relying upon what gets spit out too in the context of the practice of law. It's just an interesting area to me.
It's incredibly interesting. So, we're in its infancy right now. It doesn't feel like it, but we are in its infancy. And so, to your point, there are vendors that I'll meet with them 6 months ago, and I'm like, that's not really for us. And then 6 months later, the evolution of their product has been just incredible. I'm like, whoa, wow, that's for me. So because it's moving so rapidly, you have to give people more than one shot to see what it is that they're really developing. I view AI for us as a tool. It's something like, when computers came on, there are these things that can help make our jobs a little bit easier. It is not a substitute for what we do or anything like that. But I would point out, people always compare things to this perfect. We're not perfect right now. Our staff makes mistakes all the time. The people that I have that do summaries of medical records, people make mistakes. Human beings are going to make mistakes. So the question is not, is AI making mistakes? The question is how do the AI mistakes compare to human mistakes at a macro level? And I think that when you look at it like that, you are less frightened by it because I think at a macro level, it's showing us very much how powerful it can be. That being said, knowing it can make mistakes, just like we know our staff can make mistakes, or I make mistakes, that you have to have mechanisms in place that are designed to catch those mistakes. And so it's really understanding how to use it in a meaningful way. And what I've learned about technology is a lot of firms will buy a bunch of technology and it's overwhelming to them, and they might use 5% of their technology because it's just too overwhelming to learn. And so I really advocate for people to crawl, walk, and run when it comes into this type of thing. Get very comfortable with the very basics, and then start moving. Like I tell people, don't even think about it from a legal point of view. Just sit down with Chat and Claude and similar things that are out there and talk to it. Just learn how it works and how the iterations of it work and how it thinks and how you react to it. And then you can start moving it over into the practice of law once you kind of get comfortable with it. And it's just going to get better and better for us. And remember, we're still using binary computers, zeros and ones. We're on the verge of the quantum computer revolution, which I don't know if you pay much attention to the speed of quantum computing, but they talk about how quantum computing can do in 5 seconds what today's computers might take 300 years to do. And so when we morph into that and you add AI together to it, wow.
Things are changing, and you either embrace it and figure out ways to leverage it because it is a tool. I mean, and you really have to understand how it works. And I've been doing a lot of work in that regard and using it and training my own GPTs that I've built. And it's pretty amazing what it can do. But the only way to figure it out is to actually jump into it and start seeing how you can deploy it and leverage it in whatever you do.
Well, it's like they say in the gym, you know how you get better at doing push-ups? You do more push-ups. So the how you get better at stuff is you utilize the tool and practice with it and get better with it. But I think the other good point that you really have to be careful about is none of these are secure. And even if they tell you that they're secure, what if they're not? And how does that impact you and your responsibilities to your client? And so I think that the next step, and you talked about it where you're building your own bots, how do we build contained bots that we can be um, comfortable that the information that we're doing is secure, is, I think, one of the things that needs to be addressed and taught at a much bigger level than it is. There are some people that I know that are way ahead of others that are doing incredible things that just blow me away with it. So, we all need to learn how to make sure that while we're utilizing this phenomenal tool, that we are doing it in an ethically responsible manner.
Yeah, we don't, at least the way I use it, I don't have that issue of I'm not using client information. But if you're using client data, medical information, injury related information, I mean, that has a lot of implications,
Yeah, I am not advocating right now for people to be using the commercially available stuff to do that, something like that. I think that's a dangerous place to be. But you can also have fun with it. I do a lot of medical malpractice cases. I'll sit there with it. A lot of our cases are misdiagnosis, and so it's, oh, what was on the differential and what wasn't. So you sit there in the deposition with the doctor, and you can say, all right, doctor, tell me everything, every sign, symptom that you consider to be important with regard to this patient. When they're telling me it, I'll have somebody typing it into Chat GPT and then say to Chat, what's the differential diagnosis? And then you have fun with and then you see it and you want it, but you can have fun with the doctor and say, hey, let's make a deal. We'll put all these things into Chat and ask for the differential diagnosis. If it comes up with what we say should have been on your differential diagnosis, we win. If it doesn't, then you win. Deal? So you got to have fun too.
It's amazing because my dad was in the hospital and I used chat because he was having some symptoms and they were, the doctors were saying, well, we're not sure what it is. And I punched it in and I was like, and it spit out exactly what it wound up being, which is just crazy. And this
Right.
was probably a year ago, so it,
Yeah. And now it's so much
yeah,
better.
I'm sure.
Exciting times, I think. People should not be afraid about it replacing their jobs. People should be afraid about not learning it and not knowing how to utilize it in the jobs that they have.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so during your time as AAJ president, how did that impact what changes or progress you hope to see in the personal injury practice moving forward?
Oh wow, what a great question. I think the thing that I see out there is you've got an aging group of lawyers. You've got these younger lawyers that are coming in that aren't getting the same opportunities at experience. They're not trying cases at the levels that we were trying cases at. I tried like 27 cases in my first 2 years of practice. That doesn't happen for people anymore. So it is what are the things that if people aren't getting trials, how do we give them experience? Because you can't go 2 years between picking juries and then all of a sudden stand in front of a jury and understand what you're doing in a comfortable manner. So I think that it's about teaching people how to practice and make sure that they're keeping their tools properly burnished. That's an incredibly important thing. I think that the younger folks today are very concerned about. I hate the phrase work-life balance because I don't think that's. I think that's kind of a trite way to talk about things, but they're looking a little bit more for fulfillment in different ways than perhaps 20 or 30 years are. And so, as people who run firms, we kind of have two choices. One is to stand on the lawn and say, these damn kids, or the other is to recognize that the times are changing and that we have to change with them. And like, if we don't work to understand this next generation, they're the ones sitting on our juries. And so if we don't understand how they're thinking, what motivates them, and things like that, how am I going to connect with them in a particular trial? So there's a very selfish reason as well from that viewpoint as to why it's so important for us to be connecting. You see um, this consolidation of law firms with where advertising has gone. And so you see the number of mega firms that are out there and the implications that that has for folks. You've seen now the movement of venture capital into our space. What are the ramifications and the implications for that? All things that I had to deal with as president of AAJ and that we're continuing to try to deal with. And everything, in my opinion, it's the yin and the yang. There's a positive to it, and there's a negative to it. And our job is to figure out how to maximize the positives while minimizing the negatives.
So I'm curious about your leadership role in AAJ. How has that influenced or changed your approach to the business side of a personal injury practice?
It has really expanded my viewpoint on things. And we are in a relationship business. And so one of the good things is that I've developed relationships everywhere. And I was already had a practice that was beyond just the confines of our state. And it has just helped me grow that, which has been very important. You're here in Florida. You know what we face with the legislature every year with the efforts to restrict people's rights. And so you have to be looking for where are the best places for us to be practicing? Where can I do the most good for people? So, and you combine that with the advent of Zoom and those types of things, where you can do so many things from no matter where it is that you are. So it has personally expanded my practice more rapidly than I thought it would, and in wonderful ways. And lawyers call me and they recognize that what they're looking for is the best lawyer for that particular case, not just somebody who may be physically down the street from them.
So you have served as a mentor, a leader in your role with the AAJ. I'm curious about the legacy that you hope to leave through that work and also the work with your law firm.
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know that I often think about personal legacy in that manner. Um, at a personal level, I'd like to be known as somebody that cared deeply, cared about their clients, cared about other people, cared about making sure that we had a system that worked the way that it was supposed to work, that gave everybody a fair shot at justice. That doesn't mean that you win every case, but it means that both sides go into the courtroom, or win or lose, both sides feel like, we had a chance to be heard, they had a chance to be heard, and the people of our community had an opportunity to speak. So often today, we're in a position where people feel like government doesn't work for them. And I think the courtroom is one of those places where government actually does, the vast majority of the time, work for the people the way that it is supposed to. Uh, Judges care, jurors, they may not want to be dragged down there to start, but something magical happens to them once they decide that they're going to, once it's decided that they're going to be on the jury, and they take their job very, very, very seriously. And virtually all of them afterwards say, I'm really glad that I did this. So it's one of those areas where government comes into close contact with everyday people every day and helps solve their problems that they have, and really work. So that's kind of a neat thing to be a part of that, where right now everybody feels like so many aspects of government aren't working for them, aren't making their lives better, aren't solving their problems. And then, from a firm point of view, I came out of being president of AAJ, and within months, I had this, just incredible opportunity to have Troy Rafferty join up with us. And Troy is, Troy. Troy's a phenomenal lawyer, has incredible results in a practice area that we had tried to get into, but really had not been successful in getting into. So all of a sudden, we had this opportunity to build something that fit in with what we had already started doing, which is growing our practice in a more national and even international way. So excited right now about what it is that we're doing. But whether it's personally, whether it's from a firm, we want to be known for making a real difference in real people's lives.
Which Mass Tort is an incredible opportunity to do that on a much larger scale.
And we're doing some really interesting stuff that is not just, at least what I consider to be mass tort historically, where you have a defective hip product or a defective drug. We're in the middle of handling these cases involving insulin price fixing. And we know about the epidemic of diabetes and how people can't afford to buy insulin, and they're going on the black market and the gray market in order to be able to do it, which is absolutely insane. And insulin in the United States costs 20, 30, 40 times what it might cost in another country. And that's not because of research and development and risk. It's because of greed and the never ending pursuit of profit of these folks. And so we've taken on that industry, and we're going to beat them, and we're going to make sure that people who need that drug can afford it.
Well, you've partnered with an incredible human being and a phenomenal trial lawyer, Troy, and A good segue, because I was going to ask you about the changes in your practice since the last time you were on the podcast, because I knew Troy had joined the firm and you were venturing into the mass tort space, jumping in really more 2 feet and expanding the practice nationally. Can you talk a little bit more about just the evolution of the firm and kind of where you guys are headed?
Yeah, I'm so excited about where we're headed. It is we're sort of at the beginning of the arc of this growth phase that I had wanted us to do, but did not anticipate it happening as quickly as it has happened. And so, what I see is that we are going to continue to expand our footprint, not just geographically, but also in the types of cases that we're working on. One of the things I always say is it is amazing the amount of negligence that has to occur on a daily basis to keep all of these law firms going forward. And when you realize, God, goodness gracious, the amount of things that are happening out there, and how do we work towards reducing that? How do we work towards doing cases where at the end of the day, I can say I made not just a difference for this family, but I made a difference for all families. And so that's something that we think about a lot. And when we're looking at cases and projects to be involved in, that's one of the things that we ask ourselves is, how is this going to be something that is going to be bigger than just that micro thing that we're looking at?
I'm curious if there are things that you've experienced in terms of what you're doing on a national level, um, in terms of advocacy, if that shaped the way you approach leadership and client service within your own law firm.
I think that there's no doubt, right? We're all a product of our experiences, and hopefully we learn from them and we learn better how to interact. I think that uh, one of the things that I've worked really hard on over the years is to be a better listener. We have a tendency as trial lawyers to want to jump in and start talking, and you have to let people talk. The other people are smart. They have good ideas. They need to be heard. And so I think that thing of being curious about people and about things and giving them a chance to take center stage is something that was helpful as a leader and has been helpful in my law firm as I tried to promote the younger lawyers who are here and our staff. I want them to grow. I want them to be able to shine in their own light, not just with my light or Fred's light or Troy's light.
So you traveled extensively as president of AAJ and heard from a lot of different law firms. I'm sure, given today's changing landscape, that you learned about some of the biggest obstacles that firms are facing out there and how they've navigated them. Can you talk about maybe 3 or 4 of those that you think are relevant or important for listeners of the podcast to take away from this?
Yeah, so I think that there are a lot of things that I hear that are common across the way. Let's start with something that's a little bit different in the sense that it's the business of law and understanding how do I best set up my law firm? Where do I get money from? And one of the things that I've learned is that, particularly for smaller law firms, the owners have difficulty separating themselves from the corporate entity that they own. And so when you talk to them about financing, and and you have to get through the concept that the law firm is borrowing money. It's either borrowing money from the lawyers that work there or it's borrowing money from a third party, but it is still borrowing money. And so once you start to understand that concept, then it takes you to, okay, am I the one that should be lending them money, or should I have a third party that's lending the money? Those decisions, I think, were easier when interest rates were much lower and you could borrow money at 2 or 3%. Now with higher rates, I think it introduces more complications. And different decisions are right for different firms. But if you're not thinking in that manner, then you're missing out. I talk to firms where they're still writing checks for things. I'm like, no, use credit cards, get the points. You can use those points to buy $100 Visa cards for a high performing employee, or you use them to travel with. So there are all these things that are out there about the business of law that people have a voracious appetite to learn about. So at AAJ, we started the Boss Summit, which is directed towards the business of law. But that's one of the things that I think that people are struggling with or want to know more about. As I talk to folks, it's staffing, whether it is employees, non-lawyer employees, or lawyers. Just people are having difficulty finding folks. And you and I talked about this before we started on the podcast. And one is, how do you build a culture when people are not together? And that can be very difficult. Talking in two dimensions to people just is not the same as being there. You lose opportunities for mentoring. You don't just get to walk into somebody's office and say, this is what I'm thinking about, and all of that. So I think you have to be, if you're going to have a firm setup where people are not all together, you have to figure out a way to be purposeful about creating a firm culture and mentorship that is effective and works for those firms. Getting cases, right? There's so much competition that's out there right now. How can we get cases? People want to know, how do I compete with all of that advertising that is going on? But then I turn around and I see these folks who are, 1 year out, and they're on TikTok, killing it, getting so many cases. So, that's a thing that people are struggling with. That's there. And then I think the other thing that I see, kind of going back to the business of law, is in a lot of these firms where people are aging, what is their transition going to be, and how are they going to do that? And I've seen some firms succeed in that, and I've seen other firms fail in it and end up breaking up. So again, things are going to happen, and you can either ignore them and let them happen however it is they're going to happen, or you can think about them, take action, and hopefully they happen in the way that you want them to happen.
It's interesting hearing you talk about that because, I have quite a few guests on the podcast that are either CEOs of law firms or CEOs of law firms or consultants that are talking to law firms about their business. Because, there's this thing about the practice of law, whether it's a law practice, whether it's a business and how it's run. And, the concepts around running a law firm like a business. I mean, obviously there are differences between some other businesses, but there's some fundamentals. And like a lot of things that you've talked about are business fundamentals that are really important. Case acquisition, client acquisition, redundancy, staffing, all of those things. It's part of what, we talk to firms about when we're talking about our services is, are you analyzing how much time your staff spends on the phone with Medicare or, with recovery contractors? And is that a most efficient use of their time or your time as a lawyer? And how can you run your practice more efficiently by leveraging either technology or both, technology and experts like us, all those things. It's interesting to hear you talk about that because I do think that, we don't learn that in law school. And there's an opportunity, right, with organizations like AAJ to help build the awareness about some of those things.
It's essential because, as you say, they don't teach us in law school about how to run a business. They don't teach us about how do you finance a business. All of those things that really they should be including as part of their curriculum. Or if they're not going to include it as part of their regular curriculum, they ought to do it as an add-on for their alumni to be able to access it, remotely. There are ways to get things done if people want to get them done. But and for us as trial lawyers, I've had lawyers that have left me to start their own practices. And I said to them, I said, you just need to understand this. What's going to happen is all of a sudden you're going to go from 100% of your time focused on cases to working on the case themselves. Now you're going to spend 30 to 40% of your time on administrative issues. So what does that mean? Well, now you're going to bring in less money because you're working on fewer cases while you're doing that. So what do you do with regard to that? And I'm happy for people to throw it out there, but I want to make sure that they are doing it in a way where they understand what they're getting into and how it is that they're going to do it. And it's really hard for us when I'm getting ready, if I'm going to go try a case for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and well, who's taking over my administrative responsibilities? So you're wearing too many hats.
Yeah. Lots of challenges as a business owner for sure. And especially as a trial lawyer, if you want to try cases and be a business owner, that is a lot of hats to wear. And sometimes you've got to figure out the best way to leverage.
It is, but I'm not ready to give up trying cases.
Yeah, I know that about you. I know that for sure. Well,
I like to do that. We're getting ready to try one in a couple of weeks that we're very excited about.
Well, I wish you luck in trial. And as we wrap up, I want to ask you an open-ended question so you can close us out with whatever you want to talk about. But as the past president of AAJ and founder of an incredibly powerful national personal injury firm, what's your view, since it's trial lawyer view?
Here's what I would say is the most important thing. We are all in this together. And I view other lawyers' success as my success and their failures as my failure. And one of the great things about us is that you can call somebody at 2:00 in the morning and say, I got a problem, and you're going to get an answer. Through AAJ, it's really a nationwide law firm. No matter where an issue may arise, there's somebody that I can call that will drop everything to help us. We put out issues and problems, and people talk through it, and it's like these real life focus groups happening at the speed of light. So I would tell folks, relationships, build your relationships, talk to people that are out there. And even more important than when things are going well, sometimes things aren't going well. We might get a little depressed. We might have lost a few cases. Things might be tough personally. And to know that you are not alone, that other people are experiencing the same things or have experienced the same things, at least for me, I think helps get through those times. So lean on your fellow trial lawyer friends. They're there to support you. And we are all in this together for one thing, and that is to help the victims of other people's wrongdoing get justice and to make the world a safer place.
Yeah, it's one of the beautiful things about this profession is that anytime, anywhere, you do have a group of people that are willing to help out because they know for the greater good, and for people that have been put through something pretty horrific. Having been through it myself, I know all too well, unfortunately. And so it really is heartwarming when I see that, because I've been a part of those groups and I see how everybody helps each other out. And it's one of the nice things you see in this area. So to that end, if anyone's listening to the podcast, and hopefully not at 2 a.m., but wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you?
Best way to reach me is my number is 561-625-6260, or my email is Sean, SEAN, @pbglaw.com.
And we'll include that in the show notes for today's episode. Thank you for tuning into Trial Law Review, and thank you, Sean, for joining me today. And we'll see everybody on the next episode.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Here is another episode of Trial Lawyer View. We hope you enjoy today's guest and discussion. Tune in to our next episode for more helpful insights from fellow trial lawyers and practice experts. This podcast is brought to you by Synergy. Visit partnerwithsynergy.com to learn more about how Synergy can free your firm to focus on what it does best.